What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video, quarterback rankings. It's time for me to release my tiered rankings, and of course, things are going to change as we learn more information from camp, but honestly, quarterback doesn't shift as much as the other positions do, so it's very likely that this list will be very close to what my final rankings are. And as always, if you enjoy our content, then be sure to leave a like on the video. It shows us that you appreciate the work that we're doing here. But let's start things off like we always do with the stat of the day. Yesterday's stat was which running back with at least 30 receptions had the highest yards per route run. The answer was, of course, Tariq Cohen. The winner was James Sosinski. Today's stat, among quarterbacks with at least 30 deep pass attempts, who had the highest adjusted completion percentage on those deep passes. All right, so I'm going to break down each of these quarterbacks, but before I do that, I want to talk about my quarterback drafting strategy because I get a lot of comments asking what it is and asking how does it relate to 6-point passing or Superflex League. So I just want to kind of do a really quick kind of summary of what my strategy is as a whole. There was a time where you could justify drafting a quarterback early, but that time is in the past. Under normal settings, which is what the vast majority of people watching this video play under, you cannot rationalize taking a quarterback early when the position is as deep as it is. However, in a 2-quarterback league, which includes Superflex, because if you play in Superflex, you are starting a quarterback in the Superflex spot 100% of the time. So in those leagues, you should be taking 3 top 25 quarterbacks. I want 3 quarterbacks on this list. I'm not overly concerned with which 3 you get. Obviously, it's not ideal to take like quarterback 22, 23, and 24, but that's just unrealistic. Like, I know you're going to take higher quarterbacks than that. So I'm not overly concerned with which 3 you get. Just make sure you feel good about all 3. People always ask me what round, and there is not a correct answer to that question. It depends on your league. You need to adapt to how your individual draft goes. If quarterbacks are flying off the board in a Superflex league, you need to start taking quarterback earlier than you anticipated. If they're not, then you can afford to wait and grab your running backs and tight ends early. What I would suggest is taking 2 top 15 guys and then your favorite sleeper. So whatever round it takes to do that, do it. 2 top 15 guys and then your favorite sleeper. And that's not top 15 based on ADP. That's top 15 based off of my rankings because I have some guys in the top 15 that are going outside the top 15. In a 6-point passing touchdown league, you should only be targeting pocket passers. Most people will not adjust their rankings. They'll just print off, whatever rankings they find online and use that and not adjust for the 6-point passing touchdown league, which means they're going to overvalue mobile quarterbacks. So only pocket passers, only guys who are going to throw for a lot of touchdowns in 6-point passing touchdown leagues. That's just a crash course of when I would take quarterbacks, but it's important that you know that you shouldn't be taking them early under normal settings. There are a boatload going in the final rounds of drafts, so just wait until then. Okay, let's start talking about some players, and if you're only here for a few guys, you're like, listen, I only want Jimmy Garoppolo. Well, I have checkpoints in the description. So go to the description, scroll down. I don't know where I'm going to put it, but scroll down to where it is and just click on the name. And then you'll be able to find just that point of what I'm talking about. But we'll start things off with Patrick Mahomes. And we're going to go in order of my rankings. So number 1, Patrick Mahomes. And there are only 3 quarterbacks, and there are quarterbacks 1, 2, and 3 that I could justify putting at the number 1 spot. But Patrick Mahomes is the correct choice. No matter what happens, Patrick Mahomes is the correct choice for the first quarterback being taken in drafts. He has by far the best chance of finishing as the top overall quarterback. And I really don't need to talk about, how good he is for obvious reasons, but he's got Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Damian Williams, and one of the best head coaches in football. Combine that with his elite talent, and it's just a slam dunk pick. He's not guaranteed to finish as the top quarterback. No one ever is. And it's actually almost never do people repeat as the top quarterback. But he'd have to get extremely unlucky to finish outside the top 3. And that's factoring in negative regression into his projection. I have him regressing in a lot of categories, but it doesn't matter. He still grades out as the top quarterback option. His style of play is just very conducive of fantasy points. So you got to take him first. Number 2, we've got Deshaun Watson, and in his first 2 seasons as a pro, he's been the quarterback 1 and 4 in fantasy points per game. Mobile quarterbacks are a cheat code in fantasy, especially when they come with monster passing upside. I mean, Watson has 5 touchdown upside every time he steps onto the field. And so when you combine that with his rushing floor, it's an extremely safe pick. Bill O'Brien offenses are always amongst the league leaders in plays per game. So Watson has elite upside if Hopkins, Fuller, and QT can all stay healthy. Plus, the Texans move from the league's easiest schedule to the hardest. That means they're going to be playing from behind a lot more often, meaning they're going to have to throw more. So they are one of the teams that could challenge the Cardinals for the most plays per game this season. And I want a proven quarterback with elite rushing upside, elite weapons, on an elite volume offense. Like, I just want that in my team. So he's number 2, and he's one of the 3 that I could see ranking as a top quarterback. And the third quarterback that I could see at the 1 spot is Andrew Luck. And we were all over Luck last season. People were overreacting to his injury like they always overreact to injuries, and his ADP was ridiculous. But now that people know that they were wrong, they want to make up for it by drafting him early this year. So now's the time to jump off. I do think he's going to have a monster season. Nick Sirianni and Frank Reich did an amazing job with the team last year, and I expect them to continue that success into 2019. Luck has an elite core of skill position players in Hilton, Campbell, Funchess, Ebron, Mack, Hines. I mean, they have field stretchers, reliable targets, red zone weapons. They have absolutely everything. Luck could absolutely finish as the top scoring fantasy quarterback this season, which is why I could honestly justify taking him as the first quarterback. I do have him at 3 because he has much lower rushing upside than Watson, and the Colts are the most likely of the 3 teams to have a lead late in the game and be able to lean on the run game because they have a great offensive line, they've got a great run game, and they're a great team. So they're the most likely of the Chiefs, Texans, and Colts to be up, in the 4th quarter in a lot of games and say, listen, we're just going to run the clock out. Because of that, it caps his upside just a little bit. So he's number 3. And at number 4, Aaron Rodgers, probably the only time I've ever ranked him outside the top 3. But let's look at Rodgers, his fantasy finishes in his last 6 healthy seasons. It's been quarterback 1, 2, 1, 7, 1, and 6. His touchdown rates in those seasons, 9, 7.1, 7.3, 5.4, 6.6, and then last season, 4.2. So his career touchdown rate is 6.2%. In the 2 years he wasn't, 1 or 2, he was at 5.4 and 4.2%. He's very likely to see positive touchdown regression this season, which means he'll very likely finish in the top 5 again. There's no reason to be scared of Aaron Rodgers, especially with the emergence of Marquez Valdes-Scantling and the return of Geronimo Allison to go with Devonta Adams. If you bump up his touchdown rate to his career average, then he is projected to finish in the top 3. If you want to see all of my projections, as well as the rankings as they change, because these are my rankings as of July 25th, then check that out at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. But let's move on to my number 5 quarterback, Cam Newton. And Newton had the best season by a mile in his career in terms of completion percentage. He beat his next best season by over 6%. And the reasoning makes perfect sense too. I mean, the Panthers built their offense to thrive on the short passing game. McCaffrey is one of the best receiving backs in the NFL, and the combination of Samuels and Moore gives Newton 2 receivers that have elite upside after the catch. Newton finished with the 2nd most yards per game in his career, and he had the 32nd deepest ADOT in the league. Plus, what you get with Newton is an elite rushing floor. He's going to be around 500 to 600 rushing yards and be around 5 to 6 rushing touchdowns. That's a really secure floor and gives him massive weekly upside. Newton has played all 16 games in his career 5 times. What does he finish in fantasy those 5 seasons? 3, 4, 3, 1, 2. I expect Newton to have one of the best seasons of his career, and yet this is the latest we've been able to draft him since 2015. At 6, Baker Mayfield. Baker is set up to dominate this season. They have an elite ground game to go along with Odell, Landry, and Njoku in the passing game. Not to mention Duke Johnson until they trade him, which I honestly do think is going to happen at some point this season. He was the quarterback 7 from weeks 9 on last season, and they added one of the best wide receivers in the league. The only downfall with Baker is that he doesn't rush as much. So like Cam Newton, for instance, is going to crush him on the ground, so he's got to make up for it in passing. But he was able to produce for fantasy last season, and he wasn't lucky either. I mean, if anything, his touchdown rate should increase. He was PFF's 6th rated quarterback from week 9 on, with the league's 2nd highest adjusted completion percentage on deep balls. So adding Odell to that offense is scary. Baker's a safe pick with a very, very low chance of busting. Seventh quarterback on the list is Kyler Murray, and Cliff Kingsbury is installing the air raid attack that we haven't seen since Chip Kelly days. I mean, this offense is going to be good. I can promise you that. This team is going to throw the ball a ton, and they're going to be aggressive in doing so. They have a top 5 running back talent in David Johnson, a strong wide receiver core featuring Christian Kirk, old-time vet Larry Fitzgerald, and the electric rookie Andy Isabella. This team's going to surprise people with how many points they score, and Kyler is the exact mold of quarterback that can put up fantasy points in a hurry. The Cardinals finished 2nd to last in plays per game last season and dead last in points per game. This season, they should finish amongst the league leaders in plays per game and should improve drastically in points per game. So when you combine elite passing volume with a quarterback who's extremely mobile, I mean, the fantasy points are going to pile up. Please do not worry too much about the offensive line. Deshaun Watson has proven for years that offensive line matters much more for running backs than for quarterbacks. Obviously, it's a bonus if a guy has an elite offensive line. It's obviously a good thing, but it's not as big of a negative when they have a bad offensive line as people make it out to be. Quarterback 8, we've got Lamar Jackson, and mobile quarterbacks, like I said, are a cheat code for fantasy, meaning that Lamar Jackson is the biggest cheat code of them all. There have been 20 quarterbacks that have had more than 100 rushing attempts in a season. Half of them have finished in the top 3 for fantasy. Well, Lamar Jackson had 119 carries in his 7 starts last season. I understand that he's going to see less volume than last year, but he had 119 carries in 7 games. He also led the league in fantasy points per dropback last season by a mile and was the quarterback 8 when he finally started, despite throwing 164 passing yards per game and getting unbelievably unlucky in the touchdown department. I mean, he was very unlucky for touchdowns. Jackson has my 6th highest projection among quarterbacks, and the Ravens face one of the easiest pass schedules in the entire league. I would be absolutely shocked if he played at least 14 games and did not finish as a quarterback 1. He is one of the easiest late round picks I have ever seen in my life. At 9, we've got Carson Wentz. I think people forget how good Carson Wentz is. Like, I don't know how you forget this quickly, but people seriously have. He was the clear-cut MVP in 2017 before he tore his ACL. Then he posted 21-7 touchdown to interception ratio in his 11 healthy games last season. He finished over 300 yards or multiple scores in 8 of 11 weeks, and he opens the season fully healthy. He's currently 4th in the MVP odds, and this offense also upgraded over the offseason. Not only has Alshon Ertz and Aguilar all returned, but Goddard is now set to take a step forward in his 2nd season. They traded for Deshaun Jackson, who's still an elite field stretcher, and they signed Jordan Howard in free agency and then drafted Miles Sanders and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Those are elite offensive weapons, and the Eagles have PFF's top-rated offensive line. I expect the Philadelphia Eagles to make another Super Bowl run this season, and I expect Carson Wentz to be the driving force behind it. If he can stay healthy, he will exceed his ADP. At 10, we have Matt Ryan, and my ranking on Matt Ryan is probably going to be lower than most. I don't think he's a bad pick at all. I just don't like taking non-mobile quarterbacks, and Ryan is going to add virtually nothing with his legs. I mean, he's never been over 150 rushing yards, so if he gets unlucky at all in the touchdown department, then he's going to bust. I mean, these are Matt Ryan's finishes over the last 10 years in fantasy football. 14, 19, 8, 8, 7, 15, 7, 19, 2, 15, 2. He's a good quarterback, but he's had 2 seasons with abnormally high touchdown rates. Care to take a guess as to which 2 they were? Even giving him the 5th highest passing touchdown projection, I can't justify ranking him as high as his ADP is. He's going to need to get lucky in the touchdown department to pay off, and I don't draft mid-round quarterbacks who need to get lucky. That's just not a winning strategy. He could absolutely do it, but the more likely scenario is that a few late-round quarterbacks finish ahead of him. I know that he plays like a few more games in a dome this season, so people want to all of a sudden be taking him in like the early rounds, but he needs to have another MVP caliber season to pay off his current ADP. And I'm not drafting someone who needs to win the MVP to be a good pick in fantasy. At 11, we have Jared Goff. And if we were to just completely throw rushing out of the mix, then Goff is probably a top 5 fantasy quarterback. But he adds nothing on the ground. I mean, after his terrible rookie season, he did finish as a quarterback 12-7 with Sean McVay as his head coach. He's got Cooks, Woods, Kupp, Gurley, Henderson, Everett surrounding him, which is honestly a pretty dangerous core of skill position players. Goff should finish around 4,600 to 4,800 passing yards, should be in the low 30s for passing touchdowns, and that sort of stat line will make him a quarterback 1 for the 3rd consecutive season. His production has not been a fluke. This is an elite offense that's going to score touchdowns, and his touchdown rate has been completely normal, so I don't see any regression there. I'm cool with drafting Jared Goff if he falls in drafts, but he rarely does so. He's still kind of going to those middle rounds, which I usually just don't spend on a quarterback. So I really like him as a late QB1, like, in that 10, 11, 12, 13 range, if that's where he's going in drafts, but he's typically not. So he's typically going a little bit earlier than I would like. At quarterback 12, we have Drew Brees, and a lot's been made of Brees' decrease in passing attempts, but deservingly so. From 2010 to 2016, he's had over 625 pass attempts in every single season, with 650 or more in all but one. Then, the Saints shifted towards a more balanced approach, giving Brees 536 and 489 pass attempts over the last 2 seasons. It's not exactly a coincidence, though, that these last 2 years have been 2 of the better years in the Saints franchise. I mean, not like the 2 best, but 2 of the better years. They've won the division in both seasons, and they got their season cut short last season, just shy of the Super Bowl due to inept officiating. This Saints team has been good on both sides of the ball, so they haven't needed to get into 80 or 90 point shootouts like they have in the past. That's led to fewer games with 35 or more pass attempts, and really, Brees had 4 last season, over 35 pass attempts. So there's just a lot less potential to lead the league in passing. So when you combine that with, again, a quarterback that has no rushing ability, then he comes with a much lower floor than we're used to seeing for Drew Brees. It is worth noting that the dude scores rushing touchdowns. He's got 9 rushing touchdowns over the last 2 seasons on 150 total rushing yards. That's not really a fluke. I mean, he's had very high rushing touchdown to carry rates over his career, so it helps a little bit and makes him a solid pick, again, as a low-end quarterback 1, but he's typically being drafted as a mid-range quarterback 1, so I haven't been getting him. At 13, we got famous Jameis, and people have definitely forgotten how good the Bucs passing attack has been these last few seasons. Winston and Fitzmagic would have combined for the number 2 quarterback behind only Patrick Mahomes. And Winston was the quarterback 1 when his team let him play the entire game. The quarterback 1. This offense was built to throw the football, and that's exactly what they're going to do. The core of Evans, Godwin, Howard rivals any other trio in the NFL, and if they can stay healthy, then this team is going to put up some monster passing numbers. The defense is not so great, and they don't really have that great of an ability to run the football. That's going to lead to the Bucs finishing in the top 5 in pass attempts for the 3rd consecutive season. It doesn't matter that much what you think about Jameis Winston. I know some of you don't think he's a very good quarterback, but he doesn't have to be. He can produce monster numbers in fantasy even if he's not all that good. Just look at what he was able to do last season. I'm heavily targeting Godwin and Howard this season because while I honestly don't think Winston's that great of a quarterback, it doesn't matter because this offense is going to score a ton of points through the air, and there's no one that they have on their bench that they would consider playing over Winston, at least for this season. 14, we've got Kirk Cousins, and his ADP makes 0 sense. I mean, in his first season with the Vikings, he still threw for 30 touchdowns, even with his lead back being injured for most of the season. The Vikings offense never hit their full potential, finishing 18th in points per game, And with another offseason with the team, a slightly improved offensive line, and hopefully a healthy Dalvin Cook, Cousins should improve on his 2018 numbers. What did he do in 2018? Well, he finishes the quarterback 13, yet he's being taken as the 21st quarterback off the board. That's why you wait on quarterback, because that's absolutely absurd. Quarterback 15 is Russell Wilson, and some of you might be surprised by this ranking, but you shouldn't be. I mean, the Seahawks have scripted far fewer quarterback runs than they did early in his career, and they've implemented a run-first approach to the offense. Well, I don't want a quarterback on a team that's run-first. Last season, Wilson had an 8.2% touchdown rate, which is significantly above his career average and is significantly higher than any quarterback can sustain. I mean, even Peyton Manning had a 5.7% touchdown rate in his career, and he had just 2 seasons over 6.5%. Wilson just had 8.2%. He's going to see negative regression in his touchdown rate, and since there's no reason to expect his volume overall to increase, there's no reason we should be targeting him in drafts. But he's being taken as the quarterback 8 right now. So in this hyperly efficient season we just talked about, he was the quarterback 9. Why are we taking him as the quarterback 8? I mean, that makes absolutely no sense. We just saw best case scenario, and he still wouldn't have even paid off quarterback 8. Makes no sense. So stop drafting Russell Wilson. Let's move on to 16, though, and it's Dak Prescott. And over the last 3 seasons, he's finished the quarterback 6, 11, and 10. This season, he has probably his best weapons of his career. Amari Cooper is an elite wide receiver. Gallup is going to be a great wide receiver and should take steps forward in his development this year. Zeke hopefully won't hold out, and they have the second best projected offensive line. Dak will never be amongst the league leaders in passing yardage because that's not the way the Cowboys offense is built. But he doesn't need to be because he makes up with it with his legs. He finished around 300 rushing yards in each of his first 3 seasons, and he's had exactly 6 rushing touchdowns in each year. They've been the driving force behind why he's finished the quarterback 1, and that is why I can't rank him as a quarterback 1. Expecting a quarterback to finish with 6 rushing touchdowns on 60 to 70 carries is very difficult to do. I have him projected for a little over 3 rushing touchdowns in the season, and if you add that to his projected passing volume, he comes out to the quarterback 16. Had Dak finished with only 3 rushing touchdowns last season, he would have finished the quarterback 15 instead of 10. That's the range I like him at. He's not a quarterback 1, but he can be in a deeper format, like a 16-team league, and he's a much better quarterback 2 in like a super flex league. That's where I view Dak at this season. At 17, we got Trubisky, and the Bears ranked 10th in scoring last season, and I expect them to take a small step forward this year. I mean, Trubisky has another offseason with Matt Nagy. The team has upgraded offensive weapons. The core of Cohen, Robinson, Trubisky, Miller is returning, but they've also added Cordero Patterson. They've gotten rookie David Montgomery, who's definitely an upgrade over Jordan Howard. And we look at his rushing. I mean, he's also around 500 rushing yards on the ground, and we know the importance of rushing and stabilizing quarterback production for fantasy. My only concern with Mitch is that I genuinely have no clue if he's a good quarterback. I don't know. I mean, we've seen flashes where he's awesome, but then we've seen games where he just falls apart. That's a little bit frustrating for fantasy, when he goes for like 404 touchdowns and then 150 and 1 touchdown. You're like, what is happening? But the upside is there. And if you think he's going to capitalize on that upside, then go for it. If you don't, then don't. I mean, this isn't a situation with Winston, though. I mean, with Winston, even if you think he's a bad quarterback, the volume will be there. I mean, even if he stinks, he's going to throw the ball so many times that he'll pay off in fantasy. But if you think that Trubisky stinks, he's probably not going to have the volume to make up for it. So this is all on you. If you think he's a really good quarterback, draft him because he's a value. But if you don't think he's good, listen, there are a million other quarterbacks. Just take some of them. At 18, we got Jimmy Garoppolo, and this is honestly one of my favorite late round picks. If you can't get Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, Kirk Cousins, or Winston, I'm targeting Jimmy Garoppolo. Last season, Jimmy G was the 10th quarterback off the board, being taken in the 9th round. He's currently the 22nd quarterback off the board, being taken in the 15th round. So what changed you actually? Wow, what led to this drop in people's opinions? Well, this is what changed. The team upgraded their ground game. They added weapons in the receiving game, and now we have confirmed that Kyle Shanahan's an elite head coach. Jimmy G is a better pick this season than he was last season, except now he's virtually free. This is again why we don't draft quarterbacks early. Guys like Garoppolo and Lamar Jackson are available at the end of drafts, solely because there are just too many elite options that there aren't enough teams in your league to get all of them. Let's move on to quarterback 19. And at 19, we've got Phillip Rivers. And the Chargers have been hit with the injury bug over the last few seasons now. But maybe this is the year, I don't know, maybe this is the year where they're finally healthy. His supporting cast, when healthy, of Allen, Gordon, Williams, Henry, Eckler is awesome. I mean, that's a fantastic cast, and he's thrown for over 4,300 yards in each of the last 4 seasons, averaging 30.5 passing touchdowns over that stretch. Incredibly, look at his rushing numbers. It is unbelievable. He hasn't scored a rushing touchdown since 2011. In fact, Lamar Jackson already has more career rushing touchdowns than Phillip Rivers. That's unreal. So all of his value is coming through the air, which means he basically can't finish as a top 5 quarterback. But if his team stays healthy, then 38 touchdown passes is technically in his range of outcomes. So I'm comfortable taking him in the very late portions of drafts if you miss out on those earlier options. Because again, that core, if it stays healthy and doesn't hold out, is unreal. I mean, it's a fantastic core. So he should have a solid season. It's just he's going to have some of those games where you're like, come on, because he's got no rushing upside. At 20, we've got Josh Allen. And now Allen isn't someone I'd want as my quarterback 1. Like, we're getting to that range where I'm in a 12-team league and I'm in the 20s for my rankings for my quarterback 1. Like, I better have gotten, I mean, you probably did get elite value because everyone else was being ridiculous and taking like 3 quarterbacks. But he's not someone I'd feel comfortable with as my quarterback 1, but he's someone who could legitimately finish in the top 10 this season. The passing volume isn't going to be there. It's just not going to be, which means his passing touchdowns also won't be. But he's an elite athlete, and he can make up for that lack of passing with his legs. He made 11 starts as a rookie, and he was over 90 rushing yards or a touchdown in 7 of those 11 starts. He finished the season with 10 total passing touchdowns, yet he finished within a half a point per game of Rivers, Cousins, Brady, and Carson Wentz. That's the power of rushing. I do expect him to carry the ball a little bit less this season because they want to keep him healthy, and that's the easiest way to keep him healthy is to say, hey, maybe run the ball a few less times. But he's still going to scramble a ton because he doesn't have very many people to throw to. So he is a legitimate guy you can draft late and maybe a superflex league as your quarterback too. When other people are taking the pocket passers, listen, he's going to have some games where he's over 100 rushing yards. That's elite upside. So he's going to be someone that definitely wins weeks, but also loses weeks. At 21, Big Ben Roethlisberger. And I was all in on Big Ben last season. I predicted he would lead the league in passing for the first time in his career. Then he did. And I beat the drum hard for him as an undervalued quarterback. This season, though, I'll be passing. I just can't justify taking him as the 13th quarterback, in the 9th round when there are a million quarterback options late in drafts. I can't spend the 9th round pick on a quarterback who doesn't run the ball at all and just lost their top wide receiver, and that's a losing strategy. He could absolutely be amongst the league leaders in pass attempts again, but the more likely scenario is that they run the ball a little bit more, he loses out on some efficiency, and finishes more as a streaming option than a full-time starter. So he's gonna win someone $1 million 1 week this season, but he's gonna have weeks that are just a dumpster fire. So I'm gonna pass on him and let the public take him after his monster season. At 22, we have Tom Brady, and I pray that Tom Brady, doesn't take my ranking personally. Like, he's still an elite quarterback. There's no argument against that, and the Patriots are going to be amongst the league leaders in points scored again this season. The thing is, they're gonna run the ball a bunch. So he's going to need to get lucky in the touchdown department to be a reliable fantasy starter. Plus, he won't be adding anything with his legs, so he's going to need to be around 300 passing yards each week to be worth starting. He'll for sure do that some weeks, but you won't be able to rely on it. So he's someone I'd more target as my quarterback 3 in like a superflex league, which is something I never thought that I would say. But the Patriots offense has changed to try and preserve him as long as possible. And it's the right thing to do. It's the reason they just won their 3rd Super Bowl in 5 years. They're not going to have Brady throw the ball 600 times because they don't have to. They can win giving him very limited volume. So that's what they're going to do. So I can't have him in fantasy. Quarterback 23 is Matthew Stafford. And ranking Stafford this low just hurts because I think he's a good quarterback, But, oh my goodness, Matt Patricia is just such an embarrassment of a head coach. I still celebrate the day that he left New England, and I'm sure Detroit will do the same when he's fired. He is an absolute disgrace of a head coach and should not be in the league. But here we are, in this cocoon we call the NFL, where billion-dollar franchises look at his track record, look at his embarrassment of an offense, and are like, yeah, you can tank my team in the future. Like, Stafford is a good quarterback, and he deserves better than Matt Patricia. Unfortunately, it's going to be at least one more year before they finally fire him. And so in the meantime, we just have to stand by and just watch this archaic offense limp towards the end zone. So when the Lions GM finally wakes up, maybe Stafford can return to his old self. But until then, he's only viable in Superflex leagues, which is unfortunate. At 24, we have Sam Darnold, and the Jets offense, I believe, will surprise some people this season. It's not going to be elite, and it's not going to be because of their ground game. He was PFF's second-rated quarterback last season and threw just one interception after returning from his ankle injury. He now has Anderson and Nunwan Crowder as his receiving weapons with Bell out of the backfield. Plus, he's got Chris Herndon, which we all know I like. So once he returns from suspension, that's going to be, at least solid core of skill position players. Like, it's not elite. I'm not saying the Jets offense will be elite, because they're not. But it's going to be better than people think. And it's a dangerous group that Sam Darnold could realistically be a streaming option some weeks. He can be used as a quarterback 2 in Superflex leagues. He's not someone I want in a single quarterback league, but we're at 24. I mean, what are you expecting in this range? So I have him at 24. I think that's probably around where he ends up. But in Superflex leagues, but I know an increasing amount of you playing, he's a solid option. So definitely target him late. And at 25, the last quarterback I'll talk about today is Marcus Mariota. And Mariota struggled through nerve damage and injuries to his receiving core and just bad play calling. I mean, he went through a lot last season. And while we can't be sure that the play calling will improve, he is recovered from the injury. Delaney Walker will be back. They signed slot specialist Adam Humphries in free agency. They drafted my favorite wide receiver in the draft class, A.J. Brown. So their core of Henry, Davis, Brown, Hump, Walker doesn't jump off the page as elite because it's not. But it's by far the best core he's ever had in his career, and he has the talent to produce in fantasy with those weapons. I don't want him as my quarterback 1 in 12 quarterback league, but again, another guy you can target in best ball or in Superflex leagues. So those are my top 25 quarterbacks. If you want to see the rest of my list, then check it out at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. But that's the end of this video. I hope you did enjoy. If you did, how about hitting that like button? If you're new here, how about subscribing to the channel? But thanks for watching.